Okay, class, let's move on to Chapter 7, which is about organizing your speech. As you are creating an outline, you must keep in mind that an organizational pattern is essential in order to make sure that you are planning and delivering your speech in an organized format. So there's a structure, a pattern that we use to make sure that the speech makes sense to both you and the audience that's listening to it. It feels good when something is organized well because it really feels like it follows a certain sequence. So let's talk about the first one, chronological. Chronological is a speech organizational pattern that you use when you are trying to move your audience through sequences in time. So let's say you are doing sequential steps. I had a student a couple semesters ago who did her informative speech on how to make her grandmother's Rice Krispie recipe. So she used a chronological pattern in that she used sequential steps. So the first thing you do is, and then she gave it to us. The second thing you do is, and then she gave it to us. So that is a chronological pattern that you're moving your audience through. Another good example of this is I had a speech a couple semesters ago where a student gave us the detailed overview of the Battle of Gettysburg as part of her informative speech, and she broke it up chronologically with dates. She talked about what happened the second day, the first day, the second day, and the third day. These are good. This is a good organizational pattern to use when you are talking about an informative speech, a persuasive speech, and even a special occasion speech works as well. Topical, which is honestly what most students use when they are creating their informative speech, is a organizational pattern that you highlight based on the subtopics that you're using. So you divide your speech up based on the topics that relate to your main topic. So that is when your topics are kind of inherent to what your main topic is. So when your main points pretty much are derived from exactly what your topic is going to be. So let's say, for example, you're going to talk about how this necklace, you bring in a necklace and you say, this is what I want to talk about because it means something to me. Topical means that your main points are all going to be about this necklace. So this necklace means something to me, this is how I got it, and I want to talk about its impact on my life, right? Those are three main points that you can use. It's good for informative, persuasive, and special occasion speeches. Spatial is when you use an organizational pattern that arranges space relevant to an event, place, or object. So you're trying to walk your audience through a certain space or setting in time. So a great example of that is I had a student a couple semesters ago talk about getting Beats headphones for Christmas, and he talked about what it was like that morning and opening gifts and explaining what he was wearing and his sister was wearing and what the tree looked like in the living room, and kind of really set a spatial pattern for everybody. And then he talks about opening all his gifts and not getting these headphones, and then his parents had one present behind the tree and they surprised him with these headphones. So it really helped walk the audience through a different event or space in relation to your topic. This organizational pattern is good for information or informative speeches and special occasion speeches. The next one is causal, and this is when you are trying to explain a cause and effect relationship or an effect to a cause relationship. So this focuses on when there are consequences to something that is either happening or could be happening. So when you're trying to explain maybe the effects that would happen if you do something specifically. If it's informative, it's great for informative. It's also fantastic for persuasive speeches and also good for occasional speeches. Comparative is when your topic is either explaining something or is urging you to do something by comparing it to something else. And that comparison is usually something negative that kind of forces you or forces you to look at doing the alternative, which is that argument that you're trying to make. It's good for technical topics or maybe something that's very advanced or very difficult to understand. You're trying to compare it to something that maybe the audience understands, or you're comparing it to the alternative that the audience doesn't want to do or doesn't want to have happen. This is really good for informative speeches and persuasive speeches. I would recommend this for persuasive speeches because it's really good to call to action if you're trying to get somebody to do something with your information. Problem solution is similar to cause and effect, but your main points, rather than being cause and effect relationship, are actually problem solution. So you are explaining a problem and then you follow it by advocating for that solution. So definitely good for persuasive. You can sometimes use it for informative, but it gets a little hairy, so you definitely want to try to use it for persuasive if you can. I would say it's pretty hard to do for informative, so although you can do it, I would say in persuasive is the best place to use that. And then Monroe's motivational sequence. This is when you are trying to motivate your audience to do something, and it's action-based. So it's based on you need them to do something, and there's a call to action at the end. So you're trying to show them a way, basically. You're trying to say, this is available to you, this is how you do it, let me help you do it, and then you give them the way to do it at the end. So there's 5 steps to the motivational sequence, but the first thing is establishing a need for that motivation, and then walking them through the steps on how to do that, and showing them sometimes that not doing it is also a problem as well. There's a specific call to action at the end, and that's the crux of persuasive speaking, so it's definitely good for persuasive and not good for any other type of speech. When you're creating your main points on your outline, you want to keep in mind that your complete sentences, again, this is the preparation outline, you are writing 1 complete sentence and 1 idea as each point. So if you type period and you move on to the next sentence, that is a brand new point, whether it's a brand new point that lives in the same area or it's a subpoint underneath. You want to make sure that every point is 1 idea. Then you make sure that you have declarative statements, that everything coordinates with each other, that they are parallel with what you're trying to say. So make sure you reverse back up. So when you are typing, let's say, a numerical number 1, make sure it relates to whatever the capital letter is it lives underneath. Make sure that capital letter is coordinating and parallel to whatever the Roman numeral is sitting underneath. So after you write out your outline, reverse it back up and make sure everything relates to whatever it's tucked underneath. And then make sure that you expand upon subpoints. So if you have something more to say, something in more detail to say about a point or a subpoint, just remember, tuck it underneath and explain it out. Every point is a new sentence. So every time you have a new idea, a new point, you want to make sure it's a new sentence. And then you expand upon your subpoint. So elaborate on each point. Make sure that you're emphasizing and putting detail in everything. You don't want to leave your audience kind of fuzzy or asking more questions about what you're saying. Make sure you're explaining everything and you have everything in detail. And remember that subpoints can also have subpoints. So if you're saying something underneath of something and then you want to go into even more detail, that's considered, as the book calls it, a subpoint. But every subpoint can have a subpoint underneath of it. That is fine. Go into as much detail as you feel necessary to make sure that your audience is informed about the information that you're providing to them. So organizational patterns, as you can see, there are a few to select from. Hopefully, as we went through this slideshow presentation, you're able to understand them, and kind of knowing what your topic is going to be, you kind of link it into which one you're going to use. Hopefully, as I was explaining them, you could relate one to your topic that you think is best to use. As I've said throughout the semester, you can call, email me, ask me any questions you have, run ideas by me. If you're thinking maybe you have 2 organizational patterns that you want to use and you want to talk it out with me, that's absolutely fine. Just shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to talk those through with you. That is organizational patterns.